Hiya, it's your boy Brett, aka Sir Kittyfish, aka Skitty. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today I have planned kind of an introduction. I've been making a few videos, I've been talking about a few things going on in my life, but a lot of you who have joined or just haven't really had the chance to get to know the real me. I figured that today I'm going to do a mini step one for my video today. I'm going to try and keep it somewhere in and around a half an hour as best as possible. So what a step one is basically my life story from when I started as a kid into young adulthood up until my adult life, leading into my addictions and how I ended up where I'm at right now. Trying to consolidate all of that into a half an hour period is sometimes difficult, but I'll do the best that I can. So for starters, my real name is Brett. I was born in Ogden, Utah, and I was raised in Sunset, Utah. And after that, my parents split up at a young age. I think I was maybe somewhere in between 5 to 7 years old, and kind of bounced around and moved around a lot as a kid. Before I came here, I've mentioned this in previous videos that I've done. I had a channel with my wife before she passed away that I left a video on where I talked with God before I was born. That's kind of a preamble for me in doing this video, because tomorrow I'm going to upload that video from that channel onto this channel. So it will be on my channel, and people who want to get to know me or have a little context, because I've told a few people that, but I really only deep down tell the full story to people that I trust. But it is something that I've always wanted to put out there for people to be able to hear and absorb. I think that's kind of like the whole mission of the reason why I still retain the memory of my existence before coming here. Anyway, yeah, as a kid, I grew up in Sunset, Utah. My dad was in the military. He was a cook, lieutenant colonel, and with the Marines. And after he ended up getting out of service, he was baptized as a Mormon, but he lived kind of a wild lifestyle. I remember ever since I was a little kid growing up, he always had weed around, he always had alcohol around. I grew up around triple beam balances and things of that nature. My mom, she was a Catholic, but she didn't really exactly follow her faith as much as she would have, you would have thought. She was kind of a Jack Catholic, I guess you would call her, because she would still pray, she still believed in God, but she didn't believe in going to church and all that other stuff like that, which I kind of don't blame her now that I'm older and I understand a lot more in my own faith. I've always had a good idea about who God was, but my parents basically gave me the green light to kind of find my own way. I grew up with 3 siblings. They were on my mom's side. They were my half brother, my half sisters. I have 2 of them, an older and a younger, and I was the baby of the family. Growing up, had a really good childhood with my mom, my dad, and my 2 sisters. And eventually, my older sister, due to my, relationship between her and my mom, and also her, getting older and going to college, she felt it was time to move on. So she ended up moving on, which kind of broke my heart. That was my first real life dealing with the pain of loss. I didn't really understand as a kid, and I loved my sister, and so I didn't really understand at that point in time. So that was kind of difficult to deal with. So it was just me and my younger sister, and then the split happened. Eventually, my mom got sick of my dad's shit. He kept, getting in trouble with the law, and she wasn't really too big on the marijuana and the drinking and the partying and everything like that. So they eventually ended up splitting up. And I ended up living with my dad for a while, and kind of lived with my mom for a while, kind of jumping between place to place. My mom eventually ended up meeting my stepdad, and when he was younger, you know, him and my mom were always fighting, getting into fights and things like that. And so I liked him as a person because we got along, we played a lot of games together, but just seeing him and my mom get into arguments, you know, made me feel some type of way, and I had a lot of resentments towards him because of that. And I didn't really understand the logic behind why they were fighting. You know, it just seemed like it was all one-sided. And so growing up, I ended up doing elementary in Sunset, Utah, and I ended up bouncing around from place to place, and eventually moved to Oregon with my mom and my stepdad for a while. My sister, she ended up moving with her side of her family. I never really had the chance to get to know my stepbrother too much because he chose to live with his dad, which is respectable, and I completely understand that. Later on in life, I did get the opportunity to meet him. Very great guy. Unfortunately, he took his life to suicide, and I found that out later on in life not too long ago, and I am fucking crushed. It's one of those things where it's like, after all the pain and loss that I've dealt with, that was just fucking icing on the cake, sort of say. Anyway, I ended up moving to Oregon with my mom, lived out there for a while, and it was okay. I was living with my sister, my younger sister, and my cousin, and eventually it was just me and my cousin because my younger sister ended up moving with her side of her family, and basically moving on with life. You know, she got older as well, and decided to take her own path. Anyway, I eventually got to the point to where I had a decision to make. My mom asked me who would I rather live with, and my mom was always I would say the punisher, the one who distributed punishments to us kids whenever we messed up. My dad, he was the provider. He was always going to work, and he was kind of in his party stage after he got out of the service. Long hair down to his butt, always partying all the time, drinking, smoking, gambling. That was his MO. My mom, she was very cool, very nice. I love her a lot, but she was the strict one. She was the enforcer. That's the word that I was looking for. Whenever kids did anything wrong, it was our ass. And so between her and my stepdad, I decided to make the decision to move with my dad as a youth, and we ended up. I basically moved back to Utah and was living in West Clinton, Utah for a while with me, my dad, and my uncle. Everything seemed like it was kind of smoothing out. I kept in contact with my mother and my stepdad, and you know, they were doing their thing, they were living their life, and my mom basically let my dad raise me for the most part. She figured that it would be a good move, mainly for the simple fact that I was a boy, and having a male figure in my life would help raise me right. Well, anyway, I did learn a lot of good values from my mother and father. I'm very grateful that they were in my life and who they were and how they were. They taught me manners. They, you know, taught me, you know, I was a very smart kid at a very young age. I remember I got straight A's in like 4th grade. Never really had a problem in school until I missed a week in school because I had the chicken pox. And it seemed like after that I was playing catch up, and things just got harder. Life started getting a little bit more difficult, and me and my dad, we butt heads. Now, he was in his party stage smoking and drinking, and as a youth, I'd always been curious about smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol, and I kind of had a feeling like I wanted to do it later on in life just to see what it was all about. My father, you know, uh, I don't know if he realized it or not, but I wanted to emulate him. He was my mentor, and if he did it, I figured there's got to be something behind it. I want to try it. So I was already built an addict from the jump in my own mindset. So I ended up, running into some friends who, this is kind of when the rap movement came out. Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, NWA was really big, and, a couple of the others and everything like that. And I started wiling out a little bit, and I can't blame music, any kind of rap or anything like that, or my friends. But what had helped push me in that direction is me and my dad. We really just butt heads. We didn't get along together. He physically abused me as a kid. He used to call me names, demean me, and I, ate just as much as he did, so I got really fat as a kid, and it didn't help my self-esteem at all whatsoever. And that was a real tough time in my life. I remember having a lot of resentments regarding my dad, to the point to where I felt like I couldn't open up to him. I couldn't be myself around him. I had to stay guarded around him. There was times where he would get drunk and hit me, and then the next day get me a toy that I told him that I wanted, as, kind of a, I don't know, kind of as like I felt bad, type of a vibe. And that went on for years. And so I kind of just isolated. My walls went up as a kid. Not having my mother and my father in my life kind of left me high and dry on my own. I ended up having a vision of a girl when I was a kid, and I had a decision that I had to make, which was kind of a crazy decision when I think about it now. I talked to God about it, and God talked to me, and he showed me a vision of a girl. And he basically, I could hear my parents fighting in the next room one time, and this is when this happened. It was in the dark, and I ended up, he ended up telling me, he's like, yeah, you'll meet this girl, but she's imperfectly perfect, and you're not going to have the best life. Or you could chase money, and that's going to be your main thing in life, is money. You're going to be focused just on that. You're never going to meet the girl. And even if you were to meet the girl, you'd be so focused on money and your own personal possessions that it wouldn't even matter to you if you did. So I chose love. I wanted to find this girl. It seemed like she was the one, my soulmate, call it what you will. And so I dedicated my life in trying to find her. I know, and I did this when I was like super young, like 6, 7 years old. There was a lot of stuff that I went through as a kid that even kind of blows my mind on what I did. But anyway, I was super young at the time, didn't think about it very much, just knew that I wanted to find this girl and dedicated my life. I didn't care what kind of life I had. And that was another reason why I trained my voice so young as a kid. I would sing along with R&B songs when I was super young and train my voice, and I still do to this day. I still sing, because I knew that if I wasn't able to find her, or I never met her, or I met her and things didn't work out, that at least I'd have my voice to fall back on to maybe potentially have a career in that in the future. So I'd already thought about all of this stuff way before it even happened, right? So anyway, a few years passed. I end up, dicking off and just really going down a bad route. Ended up meeting some really good friends. I can't say it was all bad. I was actually having some of the greatest times of my life with the friends that I met in West Clinton. I still talk to some of them to this day, and shout out my boys from West Clinton. No love lost. We've had our ups and downs and things of that nature, not all one-sided. I know I was a dick in my own aspect as well, because I was going through the ups and downs of life. So I love you guys. Stay solid. Wish the best for all of you. And I ended up finishing out my elementary school, and from West Clinton we ended up moving to Layton, Utah. Well, after I had finished elementary school, I was completely fucked off at this point. That was when I first started dabbling in cigarettes. First cigarette I smoked, I ended up smoking like half of it, couldn't even finish it. I was like, fuck this. Threw it in the toilet, flushed the toilet, got rid of it. I'm like, good riddance. Ended up trying weed though, and I fucking loved it. That was my MO. That was the biggest thing ever that I totally wanted, right? And I ended up eventually trying liquor later, and I drank like a fish. I would drink 6 to 8 shots and be perfectly fine. And there was times where I would go to school and I drank 10 to 12 shots and was straight. You know, there's a couple of times where I got too wavy, but yeah, I was pretty heavy into smoking, drinking, partying, this, that, and the other. It wasn't until I want to say about high school I ended up dabbling into crystal meth, one of my crack and crystal meth, and then eventually towards the end of my high school career I ended up dipping into ecstasy. Me and my dad were still butting heads. We got along, but we didn't. We had a good relationship and we respected each other, but we were always bumping heads. We never seen eye to eye. My grades slipped. I was completely failing, and I'm surprised I even got my GED, which eventually ended up happening. And so I never graduated. I never walked. I completely fucked off in school, and I ended up getting in a relationship that ended up falling flat. My dad was working at Hill Air Force Base. I eventually ended up working at Hill Air Force Base. And in high school, strangest thing happened. That girl that I had a vision of when I was a little kid, I ended up meeting her. We ended up getting to know each other. I knew this girl for, I want to say, about a year and a half. When I met her, it was very serendipitous, but after I got to meet her, I found out she was with a guy that I knew. We weren't exactly friends, but we weren't exactly enemies, but we became friends. So I didn't want to step on any toes or make shit weird, you know, so I was just like, yeah, I'm cool being friends. I'd rather have you as a friend than, you know, nothing, you know, or try and, you know, create bad vibes between, you know, me and my homie. Well, anyway, they ended up breaking up, and I got in my mind, I was like, damn, you know, here's my opportunity. 3 days later, she ended up hooking up with one of my other homies that I was even closer with, like a good homie that I met through one of my good homies. And so I was like, man, I lost my chance again. So I bit my tongue, you know, but eventually my buddy, he ended up catching on, and he's all like, do you love her? And I was like, yeah, I think I do, you know, like I can't hide it anymore. Like I do like her as more than a friend, you know. I eventually ended up telling her, and things just didn't work out. She wasn't feeling me, and she thought that I was lying to her, manipulating her, and I guess you could see it that way. I didn't. I wasn't trying to. I mean, I know that I secretly deep down had feelings, but at that point in time I got scared, you know, and not only that, I didn't want to step on my buddy's toes. So it was a double-edged sword, and so she didn't want to be friends with me anymore, so that broke my heart big time. I, you know, still to this day have a love for the girl. I wish her the very best, but enough time has passed where it's kind of like, you know, maybe in the next life, whatever, you know. My heart's always open to her. If she's the only female on this planet that I would say has any pull on me, if she was to hit me up and say like, hey, are you ready to go, I'd probably drop everything and follow her to the ends of time. Even with my current wife that had passed away, she knew about her, the whole story and everything. So anyway, my life kind of went into shambles after that. I ended up losing my job at Hill Air Force Base. My apartment, somebody set my January 1st of 2001, I went to a party out in Ogden, and somebody ended up setting my apartment on fire. Now, it wasn't the whole apartment, it was just a carport. I just barely got my car paid off, and the carport beam landed on the car. I only had liability insurance, so I didn't see a dime out of it. The whole front of the apartment building got caught on fire. Me, the girl that I was with, my roommate, and his girl all had to go. We got help from the Red Cross. Shout out to Red Cross. You definitely helped us out at that point in time, get on our feet. And at this point, I was hanging up Christmas lights in Salt Lake for a good minute, and just still flying by the seat of my pants, smoking, drinking, going to raves, partying, you know, just in my addictions heavy, because I didn't really care, you know. I knew about God. And from elementary up until the end of junior high, You know, there was a part in time where my dad beat my ass and I gave up on God because I got a C on my report card. And so I pissed my pants that day, and you know, it really hurt my feelings. So I was mad at God for the longest time. It wasn't until about 8th grade where I was like, you know, I'm done. You know, my arms aren't long enough to shadow box with God, so I gave my life back to God. I didn't know Jesus Christ or was baptized at this point, but like I said, I talked to God before I was born. I knew there was something out there. But between those times, I started studying different arts and different cultures, you know, different versions of who and what people thought their higher powers were and are, and you know, dabbled in a little bit of like witchcraft and sorcery and Satanism, and reading from the Quran, and you know, praying to Allah, and you know, just really trying to find my way. And you know, it opened my eyes, you know, a lot more, as opposed to just, you know, being locked down and solid on I'm right, you're wrong, you know. So I ended up testing the waters a little bit, but I ended up finding my way to Jesus. Well, actually, I just opened my heart to Jesus, and he found me. You know, right place, right time, I guess. You know, it took me sacrificing my own self-will and giving myself to him to actually realize that he never left. He was there the whole time. So anyway, I'm in a real bad spot. Me and my buddy, my roommate, we were really close buddies. We ended up bumping heads. I went one way with my girl. He went the other way with his girl. And I eventually moved with my mom for a while. She moved back from Oregon to St. George, Utah, which got me here. And so I ended up, you know, living with her for a while. It was kind of one of those things where it was like, I'll give you a place, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And eventually it got to the point where I ended up asking my girl that I was with if where she would want to live. I met her and she lived in Idaho, and she said Idaho. She wanted to be closer to her family, which I don't blame her. She was never really into the big party thing or anything like that. And so, you know, that was one of my fatal flaws in that relationship, is that I was partying and she was a normie. And so we ended up moving out to Idaho. I was still stuck on stupid, doing my bullshit, treating her like shit. And she left me. And I was basically left high and dry in Idaho, bare bones place. She took all the furniture and all the cool shit with her, but it was kind of a dump anyway. We ended up getting robbed, and like just it was ghetto as fuck. Anyway, that was the first time I ever thought that I wanted to kill myself. You know, shit was just going bad left and right. And eventually I ended up getting to the point to where I moved back to St. George. My mom called me up. She's all like, hey, you know, you always got a place with me. She was terminally ill. And so I already had a feeling, you know, I already had it built in my brain that she was going to pass away, you know, eventually. And so I was like, I didn't want to move back at first. I was like, I just barely moved out. I'm on my own now. And she's like, well, you know, if you ever feel like it. And after about a month, I ended up hitting her up. I was like, yeah, I don't know anybody out here. You know, my Uncle Dan lived out there, but I had just barely met him, not too much, like a couple of years before all of this happened. And he was the only one out there, and he was a busy guy doing his own thing, and I didn't really want to bother him. And he ended up passing away, unfortunately. He was a really great guy the time that I did get to meet him. And yeah, I ended up moving back to St. George in 2002, and I've been here ever since. I have lived in Ohio for a little while with my wife's sister, and that was just for a few months while we were visiting. But yeah, I have moved to a couple of other states after that, but yeah, we'll get into that. Anyway, ended up moving here, and like 2002. Things were going smooth. I met my last ex, and she had children and everything like that, and we gave it a fun run. And I eventually, like, I wanted to marry the girl. You know, I gave her my mom's ring. You know, our relationship seemed like we were both in our addictions, just living it up, having fun. And you know, it eventually got to the point to where her addictions were a lot stronger than my addictions, because she introduced me to heroin. And that's when I found out I have a very low tolerance for opiates. Like, I can't even take lower tab without it knocking my dick in the dirt. It just messes me up so bad, which is kind of a godsend. But anyway, she was, pretty hardcore on it, and it got to the point to where I felt like she was just going to drag me down with her. So we eventually ended up splitting up. She ended up throwing the ring at my head, and I ended up picking up, and we split up at that point. So yeah, I ended up moving on from her. I ended up going to work and everything like that, and that's when I ended up meeting my wife. I ended up meeting her, and things, we just hit it off. We ended up becoming best friends. We ended up getting to know each other really well, and we dated for, I want to say, a good couple of years, and one thing led to another, and we ended up getting married. Her dad was a pastor for a church, and that's when I really started falling into Jesus and getting to know Jesus. I got baptized as a Christian and have been following my faith ever since. Granted, I'm not a perfect person by any means, but that's kind of the road that I ended up going down. We ended up being together for 2 years, and then we got married in 2009, and I believe it's 2008, 2009, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 2009, but it's been so long. But anyway, we ended up living in St. George, and COVID hit. COVID, it seemed like we had back-to-back deaths. I believe it went my dad, her mom, my mom, and then her dad. And I was living with my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law after my father-in-law passed away. Everything was in his name. Eventually, we all had, my wife, she's Native American, and we all had our vices, and we got in a lot of fights. Cops were getting called left and right, and we were just really heavy into alcohol, smoking, drinking, and it was just gnarly for years. We ended up getting in a lot of trouble with the law. A lot of just things went bad, in all sorts of aspects, and so there was a lot of resentments there. There was a lot of regret there, and eventually me and my wife got left with the place just to hold on to by our own. My brother-in-law, my oldest brother-in-law, he ended up dipping out with his family because they were clean-cut Christians and didn't want to be around the partying phase. My older sister-in-law ended up passing away, and my other sister-in-law, she didn't want to deal with our bullshit and was drinking and smoking herself and moved on. And my brother-in-law was kind of the same way. He was the first to go, and then my sister-in-law afterwards. And so me and my wife, we started partying. We were sober for a while, trying to hold on to everything, and eventually shit just crumbled on us. And we got back into partying, smoking, drinking, everything like that. And yeah, so we were homeless at this point. Ended up moving out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and lived out there for a while. We met this dude on Facebook, and things went south with him real quick. So we were in Albuquerque for, I want to say, a good couple of years, and I want to say about a little over a year. Things kind of went south. We were living out of a homeless shelter then, and we got back into our addictions and kind of fucked shit up there. So we met this dude out there, and he invited us to go to Cali with him and his girl, and so we ended up going out there. Living out in California is a completely different lifestyle. We basically traveled the coast, all the way from Northern California all the way down to LA. Lived in Skid Row for a good while. We were homeless, and it's very fucking scary out there. Shit gets real. It's not what you see on TV where it's glitz, glam, palm trees, and even like the gangster shit. They're not lying. They're real as fuck out there, and that was above our pay grade. Like, we were definitely outsiders. Granted, we smoked and drank and we're into Jesus and shit like that, but You know, these were some real motherfuckers, and living out on the street, you know, you can't trust anybody, you know, very few and far between. So eventually we ended up moving into Riverside, California for a while. Things were kind of, you know, just a little bit crazy. And so I eventually ended up talking to my wife and ended up, you know, we ended up coming to this decision that we wanted to move back to St. George, Utah. Anyway, we ended up living here in St. George, Utah for a while. I was living at a homeless shelter, and eventually I ended up getting in a recovery program. And she was at the shelter for a while, but gave that up real quick and ended up moving in with our family friend. And she ended up calling me up, and I went from the shelter into a recovery program for a good 4 or 5 months. And things were going smooth. I was actually sober. I was enjoying the program, the brothers that I met here, and she basically gave me, you know, this, you know, breakdown where, hey, our family friend invited me and you to live here. You should come and join me. And I was like, well, I've been in this program for 4 or 5 months, or 3-4 months. I kind of want to stick it out. And she's like, well, if you want to be with them, that's fine, you know, over me. And so it was like, yeah, I get it, you know, like, you're lonely, I miss you too, I want to be with you too, and I don't want you over there at our friend's house by yourself. He was a guy, not that I didn't trust him, but still, you know, just to protect her. And so I ended up moving with her, and November 1st, 2023, tragedy happened the day after Halloween. We were, you know, getting off the bus and crossing the intersection. We were living out of a van next to our buddy's place, and she got hit by a truck right in front of me. At this juncture, I went on a downward spiral. I just wanted to smoke and drink myself to death. I was very suicidal. I was blacked out in my van, drinking gallon bottles, you know, left and right. 2 days later, my brother-in-law's friend comes up to the van and starts banging on the window. And he informed me that my brother-in-law got hit by a vehicle 2 days later at the same intersection, almost at the same time, by a lady who did some cocaine at a birthday party. I don't know the full details on that. I came out of a blackout on that, and that really just sent me over the edge. I fucking just wanted to die at that juncture, and I knew that if I had my way, that I would have went through with it. And so my mind went back to the recovery center, which was a godsend at that point. Shout out to you guys, and they took me in. You know, they understood the situation and knew what I was going through at that point in time. And yeah, I went through a really dark spiral, dark path at that juncture. So I ended up rocking the program for, I want to say, about a good six, well, it's a 9-month program, so I want to say about 5-6 months. And insurance issues ended up coming up. I was on TAM insurance, which is government, you know, Medicaid, you know, for people who are in rehab. And I ended up making too much money. I wasn't eligible to get the insurance, but the program director offered me a chance to scholarship me for the next couple of months. But at this juncture, I had a good job, I had a place of my own, I was about to get a vehicle, and things were looking good, you know. So I thought that I had my shit together. I cherry picked a lot of stuff that I liked about recovery, had some clean time under my belt, thought I had shit all figured out, and I felt like I didn't need to graduate the program to carry on. And thinking that drugs and alcohol were the problem, that was kind of my start of my downfall. I stopped going to meetings, I stopped doing PIs, I stopped connecting with my brothers, and just really isolating, you know. Like, I fell back into my addictions, I want to say no more than a week and a half, 2 weeks after the program. I felt like a pat on the back, like, hey, you were sober this long, you know, a little smoke or a little drink isn't gonna hurt. So a lot of the brothers that were reaching out to me, I ended up pushing them away. Everybody in my family, friends, I ended up pushing them away because I didn't want to, one, not only have anybody telling me what to do, but two, I didn't want to bring anybody who was in sobriety, and I knew a lot of these guys were running a good program. I didn't want to entice them or encourage them and fuck up their program, long story short. So I ended up pushing everybody away. I was isolating. There was a couple of brothers that I ended up running into that were out of the program, and they were smoking and drinking, and I partied with them for a while. A couple of really good guys that I ended up meeting. Some of them are still my best friends to this day. And I went down a wrong path, and I just started going through the roller coaster of life. I'd get a job, maintain it for a while, start fucking off, smoking and drinking, hit rock bottom. And then I'd find a new job, start getting my shit together, get some clean time, smoke and drink, hit rock bottom. And I swear I went through 4 or 5 jobs just doing the same exact motions, the same exact things, thinking that drugs and alcohol were the problem, and something was starting to click. I was starting to notice a track pattern with some of the stuff that I've been going through, because I don't normally act very out of character when I'm sober, but when I'm under the influence, I am a completely different person, obviously, and it's been proven to me on more than one occasion through my employment record. So I do want to apologize to some of the people and some of the places that I've worked at for my behavior. And eventually it got to the point to where I ended up getting a really good paying job, and I was seeing the same exact track pattern, drinking, smoking still, trying to be low key about it, and I knew that something was gonna give eventually, and it did. Eventually I ended up drinking way too much, smoked way too much, to the point to where I was seeing shadow creatures out of the corner of my eyes. I was living out of my van for, I want to say, a year and a half, just going through the motions. It was super tough, very isolated, very lonely, very depressed, missing my wife, missing my brother-in-law, missing friends and family members that I've pushed away, wanting connection, but at this juncture felt the fear, guilt, and shame of me pushing them away and not wanting to just face that. And so it was kind of a weird double-edged sword, you know, like the people that were reaching out to me, I didn't want them around, you know, because I was doing my own thing. But then when I ended up, you know, breaking down and falling apart, I got to the point to where it's like, if I ended up dying, it wouldn't even matter, you know, because I've pushed everybody away. They probably are sick of my shit, and I'm sure a lot of them still are, you know. This isn't my first go around, you know, and hopefully this time is my last go around. I'm wanting to be serious about this shit. So anyway, I ended up, my arm ended up locking up 5 times. My dad, as a kid, he ended up telling me that that's the sign of a stroke or a heart attack. So I ended up reaching out to one of my cousins, and she ended up she didn't know much about alcohol, and she's a little bit younger than me, but she gave me some sage advice from GPT and said, yeah, if that's happening to you, go to the ER. And so I had a decision that I had to make. It was either, you know, because I was a part of the Breakfast Club, waiting there at the liquor store at 10:59 because they open at 11 o'clock, waiting to get my next bottle. And I had that option or go to the ER. So I decided to go to the ER, figured, you know, this is way too scary. I don't want to die, you know, even though I felt like dying, you know. It was one of those things where it was like, now's not my time, you know, like if there's something that I can do about it and, you know, at least sober up, then so be it. And it was at this juncture where it was like, okay, well, I'm at a fork in the road. I'm either going to make my way back to the liquor store and do the same old program, same old shit, or I'm going to, you know, seek help. My mind went back to where I'm currently at now, and I ended up calling them up, letting them know my situation, and they welcomed me back with open arms. Thank you, Jesus, for that. Thank you guys, you know, who've helped me out. They ended up asking me what's going on. I told them I need your highest level of treatment you got because something didn't fucking stick last time. I don't know what's going on. I had a tucked tail between my legs, and they invited me back on May 26th of this year, 2026, and I ended up having to go to a crisis center for a couple of days to sober up, and it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, not going to the liquor store again that day. Basically saved my life. I ended up doing the residential treatment program. That was 60 days of balls to the wall recovery. no phones, no tablets, having your day from as soon as you wake up all the way until the end of the night basically pre-programmed. You got a couple of hours of free time. Other than that, that was about it, and even that was monitored, you know. So was it difficult? Yes, to a certain degree, but there was a lot of friends that I met there, a lot of brothers that I've grown fond of, and people who have actually, you know, been through recovery, who've came back, and a lot of dudes that I've met, you know, that are in recovery just like me for the first time. And it was definitely a real eye-opener, realizing that it was never drugs and alcohol that was the problem. It was me that was the problem. So that was a big punch to my pride, a big punch to my ego and my intelligence, and it brought on a little humility in my life, which was very much needed. And yeah, I'm never going to be able to figure out this addiction stuff. I had to give it back to my higher power. I had strayed from my higher power while under my addiction. I'm now slowly starting to rebuild that relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I've definitely kept an open mind this time around, and am now trying. I built my foundation on Swiss cheese. There was a lot of holes in it, so I'm now wanting to learn and do the things that I may have missed or done, because this is going to be an ongoing thing for the rest of my life that I need to work on one day at a time. Progress, not perfection. But yeah, kind of went over the half an hour mark. It's going on in about 41 minutes. If there's any questions that you guys have for me, feel free to go ahead and leave it in the comments section. Like and subscribe if you want. I know that's kind of cliche with all YouTubers and whatever. Since I've given you my name and my introduction and who I am in this video, me personally, I have realized saying, hi, my name's Brett, aka Sir Kittyfish, aka Skitty. I've been all sorts of crazy shit in my life. It's just gonna be your boy Skitty. That way on the introduction it's a little bit smoother. If you want to get to know me better, you can watch this video, or if people don't know and you got a friend or a family member that don't know, you can rewatch this video to get to know me a little bit better if you'd like. But thank you guys for stopping by. I love you, and stay blessed.